Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. I get requests. People like whiteboards. They say, Steve, can you do more stories with whiteboards? And I say, well, when they're appropriate, I can do them. But I don't actually have a lot of topics that call for whiteboards because I'm an attorney. Most of what I talk about has to do with the law. But occasionally something will pop into my head and I'll say, well, I could have illustrated that better with a whiteboard if I'd put some thought into it. So I actually had a topic that occurred to me, and this is going to come across as a little bit of a rant, but I got to talk about this. I recently, and two things I'm going to talk about today have to do with numbers. So numbers and whiteboards all go together. So I recently was talking about how I will do live YouTube feeds on Sundays at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And at the end of a video, I'll often say, hey, by the way, if you're around your computer on Sunday around 1 o'clock Eastern time, log in, say hi. 400 or 500 people show up every time I do this. I've done 4 or 5 of them now. They're a lot of fun. It reminds me of my old days doing call-in talk radio. So if you're around, and I'll be doing it again this Sunday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And I always stress that it's 1 o'clock Eastern time. And I've had people say, Steve, can you tell us what that is in UTC, or Coordinated Universal Time, which is what that stands for. And I'll often say, well, by the way, in case you're curious, Eastern time is the same time as New York City. I'm actually closer to Detroit, but Detroit is still in the Eastern time zone. In case you're curious, the next time zone over for me would be Chicago. And that would be, of course, 1 hour the other direction. And the other day I said, and so for those of you who are overseas, I jokingly said, if you're in England, for instance, you're going to be off from us by about 5 hours. 5 hours, give or take. And I said give or take because our daylight savings time ends this Sunday. So I keep saying Eastern Standard Time because there's going to be a potential shift, because I know that other parts of the world that use daylight savings time don't always shift forward or back the same time we do. And I do a radio show in Australia once a month, and I've got to do some coordination with the guy there every spring and every fall, because there's always a time where there's a bunch of offsets where we change, then they change. We got to keep all this stuff straight. Plus, they're actually a day ahead of us somehow. I know how it works. The Earth is round. We'll get to that. But I said the other day, I said, yeah. So New York Eastern time or Detroit time. I said, and England, of course, is 5 hours ahead of us. And I had two people, not one, but two people, contrarians, who jumped all over that like it was a loose ball in the end zone, which is a football reference, and say, Steve, they're not ahead of us. They're behind us. And one guy actually said, this is the problem with Americans. They're so retarded, they don't know that the earth is round. And I probably deleted the comment because anytime you name calling will get you deleted. But the point is that to suggest that England is behind us just because the numbers go one way and they go another way, what makes them behind us versus being ahead of us? And I actually said, I go, they're behind us by 5 hours. I go, so if it's 1 o'clock here, it'd be six o'clock there. I explained the direction. Okay, so if you have a line with numbers on it, right, and you know that you have a 0, and you have a 1, a 2, a 3, you'd have a -1, a -2, and a -3. And I specifically said them being 5 hours, I said ahead of us. So if it's 1 o'clock here, that would make it 6 o'clock here. If you were to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be so you get 6 o'clock. And I said they're 6 hours ahead of us. And the guys go, no, they're behind us. What are these stupid retarded Americans? And what makes somebody behind or ahead if we're talking numbers? Okay, and you might say, well, Steve, isn't this number behind this number? It depends on what you're looking at. Because as far as I'm concerned, 6 o'clock in the evening arrives first in England. 6 o'clock there, it's 1 o'clock here. Didn't they get there first? Wouldn't that put them ahead of us? And besides that, is there really like a definition somewhere that says when you're talking about time, you must say ahead when you're going this way or behind? I said there's 6 hours ahead of us because they get there first. That doesn't make sense to you. I'm really sorry, but I really think that people who complain about those kinds of things are contrarians. And they're looking for things, and they oh my God, this guy made a mistake, I'm going to jump all over it. And I had another guy jump in, and he goes, I was going to point it out, and you caught him first. It wasn't wrong. It was right. So in case you're curious, by the way, I also referred to something as London time. And I had several people go, there's no such thing as London time. Wait, the people in London don't use time? How come every time I see a wall of clocks in a newsroom, it's always New York, London, Paris, Munich, but they always show London time? No, it's Greenwich Mean Time. It's Greenwich Mean Time. Yeah, look at any map showing time zones, and they'll show you New York, Dallas, Denver, Los Angeles going that way, and then they'll show you going the other way, London and Paris. Because most people think of the big cities in those time zones. And that got me thinking, by the way, and this is the kind of thing, I don't know why, I find it interesting, but you might not. And then -4. What's that? Well, it turns out that there's a small segment of Canada way over here that actually is -4. That's east of New York, one time zone. But it's mainly Central America, Venezuela, and Argentina are -4. And then where you get really, really scarce is -3, which is Greenland and Brazil. And -2 is a couple islands in that doldrums between the continents. I guess we'd call that the Atlantic Ocean. Which includes the South Sandwich Islands. Not to be confused with the North Sandwich Islands, but the South Sandwich Islands. And then, of course, -1 is the Azores, which is more islands. But, of course, like I said, the UTC 0 would be London, Iceland. But I understand how clocks work, and I understand how time zones work. And when I say that London is ahead of New York, it is. Time-wise. You guys got there before us. You must be ahead of us. Besides, isn't that a compliment to say you're ahead of us? You really want to be behind us at all? Fine. Fine. I'll accept your argument. You guys are always behind us. See? I get in trouble for saying that too. The other argument I need to point out, and this is the one that drives me crazy because I've had this argument as recently as last week and as early as 19 years ago, is that we all know that in the grand scheme of the timeline of history, okay, you have a timeline going this way, and we're someplace out here around 2019, which I chose to write with a 1 first for some odd reason. And then, of course, we go back here into the years B, C, E, and I know it's going to trigger some people, and I apologize, but before the Common Era. And, of course, the calendars start running here, right? And so we'll all remember that at the turn of the 20th century to the 21st century, there was some debate about when did the century start. And the reason most people are aware of this is there was, for instance, an episode of Seinfeld where they crack jokes about this. But you'll also meet a lot of people who will tell you that, by the way, the century didn't end in 1999. The century ended in 2000. And if you don't understand that, you're stupid. And I've had people say that to me. And I look at them and go, no, but you're wrong. It depends on how the sentence is stated. Okay? So here's the thing. In case you don't know how this works. And I'll turn this way. And oh, wait. I think it pops up everywhere. What people are talking about is when they talk about the numbers of the centuries. So there was the 19th century. And then there was the 20th century. And so on, right? And the 20th century is the one that contained many of the 1900s. Okay? So 1955, for instance, was inside or part of the 20th century. And most people go, Steve, you're preaching to the choir. We all know this. Well, of course, the problem is that there was, and this is what confuses people, and this is where people, the contrarians in particular, want to jump all over this. There was no year 0. No one actually starts and goes, hey, yeah, remember January 3rd, the year 0. There was no year 0. There was, the first year was the year 1, presumably, right? I mean, no one was counting them at that moment in time that way. No one woke up and said, hey, I forgot to set my clock ahead or set my watch ahead. What year is this? Oh, this is year 1. Okay. By the way, what was last? Oh, remember? Damn, I keep keep dating my checks 0. No one did that, okay? And so because of the fact that the years started at 1, if you wanted to get a complete century out of that, you'd then go all the way inclusive of the year 100, okay? So the second century would equal 101 to 200, okay? And so on. So when you get to the 20th century, of course, you're talking about 1901 to the year 2000. So the thinking is that the 21st century must equal 2001 until, and so on. Okay? We haven't gotten there yet. Who knows? I assume the years will unfold in numerical order, but maybe they won't. But the point is that people say, okay, so Steve, this is how centuries work. So second century here, boom, 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 boom. So anybody who said that, okay, welcome to the new century at 2000 is wrong. Right? Well, not necessarily. Could 2000 be the beginning of a new century? And I had this discussion with several people, and I explained to them, I say, well, you know, it depends what centuries you're talking about. They go, what do you mean? I say, well, when did, let me think here now. When did the Civil War take place? Do you know? Ah, yes. Ballpark it for me. The Civil War took place in the 1800s. Yes or no? Yes, it did. Trust me on that one, my friends. How about World War... Okay, so the Civil War is the 1800s. How about World War I? When did that take place? Ah, that'd be the 1900s. Ballpark. And historians will often talk about things that happened in certain centuries. If you can't ballpark it, at least you should know these things, right? So, you know, when did Napoleon meet his end? Well, that would be in the 1800s also. I believe Waterloo was in the 1800s. And so, talking about these things, okay, ballpark figures, I'm talking about centuries. Of course, you can call a century the 1800s. The 1800s, that's a century. What's a century after the 1800s? The 1900s. How about what comes after that? Well, you'd have the 2000s, which is the century we're living in right now. So, what's the first year of the 2000s? Oh, it would be 2000. Hence why it's named that way. You don't call this century the 2001s. Oh yeah, the Civil War that happened in the 1801s. No, it didn't happen in the 1800s. Because what you're doing, obviously, is you're referring to the number that comes in front of the hundreds zeros, which you probably remember from like first or second grade, learning how numbers work, right? What makes something 100 is the fact that it has 2 zeros following it. 500, 600, 700, 1900, and so on. So, what century are we living in right now? Well, we're living in the 2000s, I would say. And we're also living in the 21st. Now, there's a mind boggler for you. How can both be true? I don't care what you people say. I'm breaking out the green marker for this, despite the fact people hate the green marker. I don't know why. It's the color of money. You should like green. But if the 21st century began... Oh my... Look at this. I don't like the green marker anymore either. Coward. Thing chickened out on me. Let's go back to black. The 21st century begins 2001. And the 2000s century begins in 2000. All that happens is the one century is 100 years long, goes like this. Other century is 100 years long. Goes like this. They overlap most of the way, but not completely. So right now, my friends, we're currently living in the wonderful 2000s or the 21st century. Take your pick. But on the first day of the century, if you want to talk the 21st century, that'd be 2001. 2000s, first day of the century is 2000. So there you go. So next time you're talking to somebody, they go, hey, you understand that the first year of the century is 2001, not 2000. You can know. Depends what century you're talking about. But that's the same kind of person who's go, you probably don't understand how time zones work either. London doesn't have time. Greenwich Mean Time. It's my dumb guy voice. I apologize. I know some people don't like it, but there you go. So there you go, my friends. And just a reminder, this Sunday, I am doing a live YouTube feed. 1 o'clock Eastern time. Do the math wherever you may be. Los Angeles, going to have to wake up before 1 o'clock. Paris, add 6 hours and do the math. But I'll leave that up to you, because I'm sure there's a lot of math here you weren't planning to see this early in the morning on a weekend. Questions or comments? Talk to you later. Bye-bye.